Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glenn Sutherland.
Welcome to another episode of Canadian Investing in the U.S. This week, my guest is Bryce Kaminsky. Bryce, if you want to give everyone a bit of an intro to yourself, and then we'll jump into a topic.
Yeah, so I started real estate investing with Stefan Arnio, probably, actually know the date, March 15th, 2015. And I knew absolutely nothing about real estate investing. I was coming from the music industry, and there's a lot of crossovers there between dealing with people and dealing with people. And so it was a fairly easy transition. I was already an entrepreneur in the sense that I was running my own recording studio at the time, and it just wasn't making enough money. I turned 30 and I was like, I got to make enough money to have things in my life. So I looked around and I said, I got to move either to Vancouver or Toronto to expand being a music producer. And Stefan at the time posted on his Facebook, I'm looking for an acquisitions manager. And I was like, well, I know Stefan from the music scene back in the day. And I decided, well, if this doesn't pan out, I can still move to Vancouver. I can still move to Toronto. So I took him up on the offer. He sat me down. He said, read this book, Money, People, Deal. And if you like the book, come back and we'll get you started. So I sat there and he's like, you got to buy the book though. So he makes me buy the book, $20. And
is it just to make sure you're serious, or like, why make you buy it when he probably has a stack of them sitting there?
Yeah, well, the one thing is he always believed that if you paid for something in your life, you would actually use it. You give people mentorship for free. You give people books for free. You give your 16-year-old kid a car for free. And what are they going to do with it? Trash it, throw it on the table. And it was kind of like a litmus test that he was going to actually get someone who cared about it. So I took the book home. I remember I read it that night. It's not a terribly deep read. I'm not a crazy reader. So it was, I opened it up, I got into it, and it really changed the way I thought about a lot of industries with the Money, People, Deal framework, where you could raise money for deals. You didn't have to have any money to actually get started in real estate. You had to find the deal, find the people who could fix it, do the deal, and then bring the money and put it all together. And now you can do an unlimited number of deals. So he started teaching me. I went through his program, gave me access to his, his program at the time. I went through the stuff. It took me I'd say about 8 or 9 weeks before I got my first deal under contract. And from there, I did 9 deals in 9 weeks. And in Canada, that's not that easy to find 9 properties in 9 weeks. So it got to a point where he's like, okay, relax on buying them. We're going to spend time fixing these things. So we went through the process of fixing that first handful of properties. So I got the whole ringer of buy, fix, sell on those properties. And I went on to continue just producing those products for him for several years. And eventually it had landed me on the self-made tour when he started doing the tour series and having the seminars. And the company grew to such an extent that it was like, okay, well, now we need more coaches, because Stefan his calendar was absolutely full. So I started teaching the bronze program, the silver program, the gold program for, at that time, it was called Stefan Arnio High Performance. And I got a lot out of the packing and unpacking of the knowledge that I already got, helping people, get into their first deal and really understand that framework of Money, People, Deal. And I can remember standing in my brother's living room, just thinking about the thing. And I was like, anyone can do this, should they desire to do this. It's not hard. There's no barrier to entry. It's really just, can you put it together? Can you work for free long enough to make money that most people will never make in that amount of time? So with real estate, the motivation will get you to the money. It's just a matter of, can you stay motivated long enough to actually get that money? So it took for several years I worked with Steph in there, and it got to the point where we were doing Canadian real estate and we were doing the real estate in Canada. And I got the opportunity with another company to go down there and work in the States. So at the time I was working with Black Card. We had renamed it to Black Card.
Yep.
And I was doing the coaching there, but I was also working with another company down in the States in Ohio. So I had the opportunity. I was like, Canada, I've kind of beat I can probably beat any market in Canada now that I understand the fundamentals. But what's it like in the States? The escrow and the title companies and the privacy laws and how easy it is to go and look up someone's equity. It's like, hey, I like this house. Go down the street, pull up and then the apps and the access and just the straight amount of inventory. It was a huge eye opener. And then, as we all know, November 2019, the pandemic starts rolling in Florida. The border closes down, and now it's practically impossible to cross the border for years and years. And so, likely something, I've been working with a guy out in Atlanta on his stuff. That's a hot market. As well as I've started looking into like the land flipping model, because I think that, land is probably, my main thing is a wholesaler, right? And so one of the most challenging things as a wholesaler, if you've ever, I'm not sure, you do a lot of wholesaling?
No, I do try to get myself in front of direct to seller, right? And then when I do that, I try to lock it up for myself. And if that doesn't work out, I'll try to create a financing. And if that doesn't work out, then I'll put it under contract and assign the deal. So I mostly keep them for myself. But if so, I do sign probably 2 to 5 a year, not a lot. That's why I don't say I'm a wholesaler at all.
Yeah, that's been my main move, because we would always acquire more than necessarily that we wanted to do. So I was always out there just acquiring. So it led me to become a wholesaler. And I realized, as a wholesaler, nobody believes what you say. Like if you're a buyer, right? A wholesaler brings you something, you're like, the ARV is $1 million and it's perfect. You look at the pictures and it's like, that's not $1 million. And the pictures are like, that's going to take way too much to fix. So I started looking into land flipping, because the easiest wholesales I've ever done were ones where I didn't ever have to walk the property. They can look at it on Google Maps and be like, this is a good enough spot to buy. So I've started investigating land flipping. Those are probably some of the most interesting conversations, because people have been holding this land generationally, and they're like, I can, someone wants to buy it. And I'm going through the tax, the tax files and finding a high equity. And I might call them up because their phone number is listed on the thing, you skip trace it. And that's just something you can't do in Canada. Like the privacy, we play a completely different marketing game up here compared to in the United States. So when I started looking into the States, the dynamic between the wholesalers and the actual like property buyers is way different. And so it became not a game about finding the worst properties. It was a game of finding the most effective use of your capital properties, because there's no limit to the number of properties you can invest in the United States. But it was, how quickly can I get my capital into this thing and out of this thing? Because you could easily buy a monster that needs way more work than it's worth. And you could buy 2 or 3 in the same amount of time and energy. In the States, another wholesaler will come along, and there's so many, and the market is just huger. So it was just like wide open spaces. And anyone who's thinking about investing in the States as a Canadian, we're not exposed to it. There's a lot of Canadian real estate investing companies and places to invest, but the cash flow in Canada, it's gone. Unless you're investing in Winnipeg, there's not really a place where your rent and your mortgage in Canada. And even now, in Winnipeg, we're coming about even. You'd be lucky to make $100 a door in Winnipeg now because the prices have inflated.
And the rent hasn't kept up, I guess.
Well, the rent is going up. Like we've seen about 30-40% rent increases. So things last year that a rent would be like $1,100, we just rented one a couple blocks away for $1,600.
That's nice.
In a neighborhood that you wouldn't get 12 or 13 a year ago. So it's keeping up, but the interest rate is killing people up here. I don't know what the interest rate's like in the States, but in Canada, the interest rate is squeezing the juice out of the thing. And it's really changing the dynamic between do I want to get in the game? A lot of people are quitting or not even playing because it doesn't make sense according to the CBC. But if you look under it, there's more opportunity now because there's less people. So the beauty of real estate investing is it balances itself. As much as the government is meddling in the business, both in the States and in Canada, it's a self-mitigating thing. Like it will even itself out. The investors like us will find a way to make money. It's just like, okay, now I have to get into creative financing. And that's becoming a big thing here in Winnipeg is rent to own, where people can't get out of their properties because they're not worth enough, but they want to get out of the property. But buying it doesn't make sense because now the interest rate is going to be too high. So the way I like to look at rent to own is it's not rent to own the house, it's rent to own the rate. We can rent to own these people's interest rates for 2 to 5 years that they've locked in for and ride out this storm. So if you're stuck in Canada and you're looking for something to invest in, explore the rent to own, the creative financing, because you can rent the rate and it's not that hard. And people are surprisingly open to it if you can explain the rent to own process to them. And we've got a guy, John Simcoe, he's a huge rent to own guy, and he's now moved back to Winnipeg. So we're really deploying that here in Winnipeg to see what we can do with that strategy, because like I said, the interest rates are keeping people out of the game.
Yeah, I had John Simcoe on the show probably about 4 years ago. He's a wealth of knowledge. You're talking about like raising the rents and stuff. I don't know a lot about Manitoba, to be completely honest, right? One thing I noticed, just even attending other Ontario real estate things, is a lot of times they're trying to create vacancies so they can raise the rents up. Whereas I noticed in the US, you just hold on to them and you just raise the rent, right? It's a little bit of a difference. You don't have to have that tenant turnover to raise the rent depending on what market and what landlord laws you're in, right? Hello, everybody. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I just wanted to let you know that I've created a new coaching program. I believe the new coaching program has way more value than any of the programs that have even existed in the past. What we've done is pre-recorded all the lessons so that you can work through it at your own pace, which is pretty cool. And then we're going to meet up on a regular basis to answer the questions, do deal analysis, and actually spend our time together working on things instead of spending our time learning things. I think this will make a seamless transition to buying in the United States and will help you solve a lot of your problems. If this is of interest to you, go to glensutherland.com/coaching. I hope to help you guys invest in the United States, and I hope we provide as much value as possible. Back to the podcast.
Yeah, well, Manitoba is pretty fair in the RTB, the rental board. But one thing with multifamily in Manitoba is if you've got more than 4 doors, you're subject to the RTB, and raising the rents on the population in multifamily is challenging. We're working on a property here on the west side of town, and it's a 34-unit apartment building. And that's kind of a big deal to find it in Canada, period, because there's definitely a shortage, or they just didn't build a lot of multifamily, especially in Winnipeg. It's just single families as far as the eye can see. And so twice now they've rejected the rent roll increases. And that's really the only way that you can refinance, because they're basing these refinances on your rents. And so there's huge caps, and it's going to take, as I said to my partner, I was like, it might not feel nice today. You're going to carry that thing for 5 years, but in 5 years, you're going to be laughing. The natural appreciation, the inflation that we're seeing, paired with the fact that you will progressively raise the rents and your refinance will work. But it's just, if you want to find an apartment building, it's probably not in Canada. These people, they hold on to them. They're generational apartment block holders. They bought them in the 70s and they're all old men now, and they are looking to exit these deals. So we're seeing them, but they're not happening on the open market. You have to network your way into multifamily in Canada because they're just handed in the back rooms. I would always say to my students, multifamily is a backroom game. It's a business of networking. You're not going to find it on MLS. Like if you go on MLS in Canada and you go multi-unit, like you're going to find some 2s and some 3s, but you're never going to find something that's large. And, be careful. If you see a large unit on MLS, it's because guys like me and you have passed over it. We're like, not interested, not working. And then it's overpriced and undervalued and you can't do anything with it. It's medium renovated and there's just no lift left. So, multifamily, I can remember in Ohio, they were selling, this was like on Forest Park somewhere, just outside of like a kind of questionable area. And it was like 150 units for 1.4 or something. It used to be a barrack of some sort. So it was like 1s and 2s.
Yeah.
But it's just crazy what you could get dollars per door in the United States is incredible.
I'm going to switch gears just slightly here. You talked about a lot of different stuff here. We talked about Ohio, Georgia, BRRRRs, lease options, sales, wholesaling, a little bit of everything. And I love talking to people who've done it all, right? At least like that's a lot of stuff. There's all kinds of creative stuff in the US. What would you say is your favorite strategy? What do you think is going to work the best in this kind of market? What are you feeling the most comfortable with right now?
Well, I think a strong fundamental knowledge of acquisitions is always going to work for someone. If you can't find it, you probably are at the mercy of someone else's pricing. So if you really want good deals in the States and in Canada, you're going to have to do the work to find these things because there's going to be a markup if you let someone else find it for you. That's just the business of real estate. So if you're really looking for something that's always going to work for you and it's going to put capital in your pocket, I'm always advising people to get started the same way Stefan kind of talks about in his books. Stage 1, you become a bird dog. You figure out how to find leads. Stage 2, you get into wholesaling. You figure out how to move these leads. And then from there, you say, okay, now I can I'm competent in finding them. I'm competent in negotiating them and getting good prices. Now I can decide, do I want to make something out of these things? Do I want to make them into a rental or a flip? And then ultimately you start making $100K or $200K a year. And you're like, okay, I got to put this money somewhere before the government decides what to do with it, put it in a charity or something. So buy and hold. And then, after a few years, you've got enough buy and hold equity that you can start lending. But if you're just getting started, and a strategy that works always is doing the hardest thing, solve a problem in your industry. And it's typically acquisitions, because the people who want to buy things, they're probably at work or they're working on the things they're already looking for. So if you can bring property to these people, you're always going to be in business. And so you add a few $1,000s onto it, and you can have a pretty good career with not a whole lot of desk time. Like it's not a 9-to-5 job wholesaling, but you might have to take a call during dinner at 7:30 or 8:30 to go and see a property at 9 because this person's got 2 days left before foreclosure and they've left it too long, and you got to hustle. But that 2 hours might be worth $10,000. So I think that acquisitions is always something that people should focus on. And unfortunately, that's not really something that programs teach. You go to Keyspire or even, with Black Card and these other programs, it doesn't cover the fundamentals of like, how do we find these things? We definitely teach people how to like fix these things. And there's some like basic find these things. But if you really want to get good and you don't want to be at the mercy of somebody else, learn how to find your product, become someone who can source their own deals and then you'll never be at the mercy of the market.
I love it. That's good stuff. And even you just doing all these different strategies. I don't remember which book of Stefan Arnio's it was, if it was Money People Deal or it was that $1 million one or whatever, but he was always talks about like, or used to talk about the money now, money soon, money later. And by just leveraging these different strategies too, you're it's so much easier to live off of. When I started my journey in real estate, I started with burrs, and it was hard. You always felt poor.
Yeah. Well, the burr strategy is great if you've got a job. So if you're really serious about the burr strategy and you don't have a job, you have to make an active income job. And that's really what sustained my real estate career. Was we would find 3 properties, and I would always say this to my students: get good at acquisitions, find 3, sell 2, keep 1. And those 2 are your paychecks, and that 1 is your wealth. Because a paycheck, like money, income is not wealth. And so burrs are a great wealth product. They can set you up for 10, 20, 30 years. And in even 10 years, you've got refinancing properties, you've got income that you can manage in the future. But what about now? Like, how do you sustain your mindset that, like, I'm broke, I'm poor? Like you were saying, burr is a very tough method if you're starting, because you're not going to get paid. Not unless you find an exceptional burr. And even then, you're going to buy it, you're going to fix it, and then you're going to rent it and then refinance it. And you're probably you're not seeing capital from that deal. There's a couple different strategies. You can get some upfront capital if you've got money partners and you can pay yourself an acquisition. But for the most part, the capital in a burr is 6 months or 8 months away. So, if you want to survive in real estate, you've got to have an income strategy and a wealth strategy. I would always break it down with my students. I'd say, what's your short term? Where's your short money? Where's your medium money? And where's your long money? So like short money, wholesaling, flipping. Medium money might be a larger multifamily flip, and then actually getting into burrs. And then the long thing is like, okay, have you been able to find an apartment block worth stacking your money into? So it's kind of a blend of those 3 things. If you can think about yourself today, yourself tomorrow, and yourself in 10 years, and serve those 3 people, you're going to have a rounded career. But if you're stuck in one of those 3, the short game keeps you in the game. And if you don't focus on your income, your short income, it's going to be very challenging and very stressful, because you're probably still going to have a job. Like you're probably still going to be at the time of someone else's time.
Yeah. And I think that's what a lot of people, their dreams or goals from this real estate is to get away from that. Right. So yeah, no, great advice. Bryce, people wanted to get a hold of you. What's your contact, any businesses, anywhere you want people to find you? Just let them know.
Yeah, you can find some of my stuff. I just started my YouTube channel, started putting stuff up on there. Bryce Kaminsky, at Bryce Kaminsky. You can find me on Facebook, Bryce Kaminsky. That's probably the 2 easiest ways. I've got a link tree, Bryce Kaminsky, and that kind of will direct you to all the different things. I'm working on a couple of different books right now, and they should be coming out in the fall. We're running Manitoba Real Estate Investors Association coming up here April, May, and June for the spring series. And yeah, I'm always interested in opportunities. So if someone's got something interesting, or they want to collaborate on something like that, they can reach out to me. And the easiest thing, like I said, is I spend most of my time on Facebook. Until Facebook collapses, that's where you're going to find me.
That's awesome. You said your books. Do you do audio or just hard books?
Right now I've got the workings of the actual written book.
Yep.
But after watching what Stefan did with the books, I realized that audiobooks are really where it is. So the book's current working title is called The Unending Task. It's about how men find purpose in work. And I think that topic is a little underserved, because we're fed some different tones about work-life balance, but it doesn't make a man happy to not be working. So the book's really about how, there's always work to be done, and are we focusing enough on our work to make ourselves happy, to be open for our family, and what that means in today's modern world with technology blurring the lines between when we're done work and really, especially as a real estate investor or an entrepreneur, your phone is on, you're on, and it might be 10, 11 o'clock. So finding that balance, shutting your phone off a little bit, and being less available will ultimately make you more focused and more money. So it's called The Unending Task, A Journey Through a Man's Work. So that's going to be coming out later this year. And it's going to be on audiobook, it's going to be on Kindle, all those things. So keep your eye out for it. It's going to be a nice short, like 200 pager, because I'm not, like I said, I'm not a huge reader. I like the audiobook. Yeah. So I'm going to be putting out the audiobook as well. It's going to be that's one of the things that I'm working on right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, and even update me whenever you do release that, and I'll add it to the show notes, because podcasts are timeless. People will come check it out like 5 years from now.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I appreciate it.
Bryce, thank you for coming on the show. I love it. Good content, good value. Honestly, I think people will really enjoy this. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, and I appreciate your time.